I think Islam hates us.
They have done nothing except wreak havoc and terror for our faith and our religion.
When we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad.
Foundations of society are fragile. We must be the shepherds of our own civilization.
Anyone answers either yes or no without making necessary distinctions, both are not telling the truth. They're lying.
Father, we pray that your word will become a hammer that breaks rocks into pieces. That you will raise up in this nation pulpits and prophets that will call the nation back to repentance.
Will you distance yourself from those who think differently, or will you join us at the table and talk about what is really important? This is the Al-Ma'idah Initiative, conversation without compromise.
Tell me a little bit about your story. Are you from Seattle originally? Are you from Somalia? What's your origin story?
So my origin is I'm from Somalia. When I was born in Somalia, raised in Seattle. Came in 1992. We were the first wave of refugees that came from through Kenya. So first we fled the civil war, went to Kenya. Then there were the UN camps that established camps for the refugee families, and then we were sponsored from those camps and came straight to Seattle in '92. Snow for the first time seeing snow. It was crazy. Just like oh my God, who ever thought that there would be Seattle in a snowstorm? It was crazy. But yeah, all my life I've been in Seattle, so I'm a Seattleite. Enjoy the Pacific Northwest. That's where home is.
So how old were you when you left Somalia?
Man, I was just I would say about 5 or 6-year-old that left Somalia. But for a 6-year-old, we were very matured. You can remember things, and you can still remember the lifestyle you lived. It's really different from the 6-year-old here today. That it's totally a different world in terms of maturity at that age, knowing the language, able to speak, articulate, as a child, because you're around elders who are, always speaking truth, talking about culture, and so we were always around that environment. So as a 6-year-old, I could remember a lot of things. I could remember Kenya. The difficulties of learning a new language, Swahili, which I really didn't appreciate. I didn't like learning Swahili. It was just too hard. And then we went straight to the camps, and then we got sponsored by an American family to Seattle.
So when you left Somalia, how long had the civil war been going on at that point?
It was fresh, man. Right when things went down, everybody had to get out. So once we knew in, I think it was like in months that things were just heading towards chaos, and knowing that, it would be really crazy to still be in that environment. And my folks, we hail from the northern Somalia, but we lived in the south, because I was, my father worked in the south with government, and so he was a local governor, and so as a governor and who hails from the north, who the government just collapsed, even the president, he's about to take, get out of the neighborhood, so everybody had to get out, so because you knew certain neighborhoods you couldn't be in, so we had to leave, and so Kenya was our destination as a family.
So going back a little further than that, then, so as a nation state, Somalia is pretty young, but the culture itself is much older. So for you personally, where do you kind of trace your sort of cultural heritage back to?
As a young man, I trace my cultural piece to the liberation spot, where my people were fighting European nation to liberate the nation. As you can tell, if you look at when the Berlin conference happened and the scramble of Africa was happening between European nations, and they were thinking about how can we carve Africa and not fight over Africa. So how can we exploit Africa and keep them under colonization and rule this nation? So Somalia was carved into three provinces. You know, you had the French colony, you had the Italian colony in the south, and in the north you had the British colony. And so as a young man, when it comes to history, I see myself in the era of liberation, because my father was a liberator. He fought to liberate his people from colonization, from the influence of the colonizers. So I see myself in that era, and I know we have a rich history. When I went back home in 2018 and 2011, you see the historical sites of, especially in the northern of Somalia, where you've heard of Las Gel. I think you heard of that, where you saw some drawings that they're saying that it's thousands of years old. And so some people can put themselves in that era, but for me, I was a child of that was born into the dictatorship time of Siad Barre, and my dad was a socialist and and worked for the dictator, and he believed in the Eastern philosophy in terms of what was going on back then, because the influence were either the democratic sphere of influence, and you have the Eastern influence where you either were down with Cuba and Russia and in the communist style of ruling. So I was born into that culture of where my father was part of that, but also he had a history of fighting against colonization, fighting for liberating his people, and so I consider myself someone who appreciate that era, someone who appreciate to be a free thinker, someone who appreciate culture, and also who is a Pan-Africanist, to be honest with you, because I don't think that Africa should have borders that were not created by us. Like you have a family that is divided into three homes. You got the French, you got the Italian influence, you had the British, and then you have Ethiopia, who had a big region of Somalis, the Ogaden region, and then you had the NFD, which is the Kenyan side, which also had a piece of Somalia. So for me, I think Africa should be one big continent, one big state, just like the United States of America enjoys, the different laws, the different governance among states, but at the same time is united as one, under one currency and under one law. And I would love to see that, be the case for Africa as well. So I'm a liberation baby. That's what you could call me. And I appreciate, I appreciate the hard work of my ancestors to liberate us from colonization, but you still see the effects of colonization still, impacts how we deal with one another today and how our nations are governed, especially in Somalia.
So on that note, that I think people who see Somalia today assume Somalia was always the way it was today or, earlier. And from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you had a period after the independence movement where you had a very open country, a prosperous country that was generally kind of up and coming, that it was generally very free. It was generally a happy place to be. And obviously you've got an enormous amount of beautiful coastline there, and it's a place for tourists. Is that true?
It is true. Whenever you hear of Somalia, the first thing that comes to folks' mind are pirates, Al-Shabaab, Black Hawk Down. Like the narrative, it's, something that is, not in favor of Somalis, not in favor of Somalia. Somalia was one of the most prosperous young nations in Africa. After South Africa, Somalia was up there. I mean, when we're talking about the top two nations, right? And you look at our history, we had exported many things. We had a nation that really was democratic, was a republic that had a free election. The first president ruled for 7 years, right? And then also had a peaceful transition to the next president until with few months he was assassinated by his bodyguard. And then you had the prime minister come in, but then that's when the dictator came in. But when you look at the history of Somalia, It's a young nation that really came together after independence and said, listen, let's bring the North and the South together and unite as one, because we speak the same language, it's just the brothers and sisters that were divided during the during the division of the Berlin Conference. But at the end of the day, people don't really we don't talk about the history that Somalia contributed to Africa. We've helped, protect borders. People don't realize we protected Burundi's border. We helped Tanzania's border. We've sent aid to Arab nations before the oil kicked in, right? So all the nations that you see today, Saudi Arabia, you see the Emirates, and all these guys that are, the most beautiful nation. Once upon a time, they were starving, and we were sending things to them, aid. And also, when you look at even during the dictatorship part, Siad Barre's ruling, we were still thriving as a nation. When you look at the literacy rate, Somalis were very well-educated people. We've created our own products, and so we don't talk about this bright side of Somalia. The only thing that we get caught up is the negativity piece. They said if it's not negative, it won't lead in the news. If it's not bleeding, it won't lead. So always people want to hear about the negative piece, but it's one of the longest coasts in Africa, a country full of rich minerals. As you can tell, if you look at history, there are some stories where nations did their best to make sure that Somalia never gets to that position again, in terms of making sure that they get to that powerful. And there were some mistakes made, and we have to be accountable for some of the mistakes that our leaders have made in terms of invading Ethiopia and losing the support of Russia and the US. And imagine a nation that is so young, democratic, functioning, doing well. The US and Russia supported the dictatorship, the fall of a democratic nation. They supported that and made sure that, the dictator ruled with an iron fist. Again, you look at some of the stakeholders that were the key players were neighboring countries, were countries who were afraid of a prosperous Somalia when it comes to leading Africa. And so we tend to forget what Somalia used to be and what it could be. And to this day, I feel like we still are, progressing in terms of a nation that has been really destroyed by war.
So explain to me then, you've got this rising star in Africa, second only to South Africa. And then what happens? How did it go from where it was then to what's going on today?
To be honest with you, you got to look at the fall of the Democratic president. When you look at when the first president created, passed on the torch, basically, which is unheard of for Africa, to be honest with you. You see a lot of dictatorship. So for Somalia to be the flagship of a democratic system and passing on the torch, and then having the assassination that occur, and to be honest with you, you look at the historical context. You look at when folks want to rule a nation, there's always division. You got to create that divide and conquer type of amongst people. And when the British ruled and the Italian ruled, even before our independence, they took advantage of the clan system. We appreciate having our clan system, and it did a lot of positive things. We've used it as a system of mediation and dealing with conflict, and there's a beautiful side to that. But also, you can also use that to your advantage if you are someone who wants to take over a land or resources that don't belong to you. And I do believe, as a person who studied history, and from my lens of because sometimes stories are told by the victor, but from my lens as a young person who studied, who studied political science at the early stages in my career, I see that the best way to rule people is through division, and you use that clan-based division. And having nations that had clan differences, that was the best way to create a rift amongst the nation, a young nation, especially that was, upcoming. I know the fall of Siad Barre, some of the atrocities he has that happened in the north contributes to that. Then you look at Ethiopia, knowing that Somalia went straight to the heart of Ethiopia. The reason why many people panicked in the West is because when Siad Barre and his soldiers, Somalia, when we invaded Ethiopia, the goal was to get back the Somali territory. But then things got escalated to the point where we got to the heart of Addis Ababa. And that was a no-no for the Western nation. And Ethiopia, who has never been colonized, this really was a panic, for Ethiopia and also for the West. And so the West, Cuba, Russia, and everybody jumped boats. They said, you know what, we got to jump sides now, that this nation is really, has the intention of taking over. And that's one of the downfall of Somalia, and people took advantage of that. And now you have crazy division. You have a country within countries. My people are here from the north, right? And Somaliland is 30 years, they were fighting for 30 years to create their own country. Although my people come from the north, and my tribe comes from the north, hails from the north, I'm against disunity. I'm against division. I will still love to see to this day the unity between the north and the south. But now everyone else is taking advantage of it. Everyone else within the country saw that division between two brothers, and they're saying, we want to rule our own state as well. So now you have this region has a president, that region has a president, that region has a president. How can a small nation like this with 12 million people have 5, 6 presidents? It's unheard of. And the world is, sitting on the sideline and just watching us act like fools. Because at the end of the day, I consider that, a bunch of separatists who are creating, a nation of 3 million people. What are we going to do with 3 million people? How can we thrive as just 3 million people? So I believe in unity. I believe in, that we need to get rid of the borders that were created, the pre-existing borders. And, I'm unapologetically pushing for that. I know some folks who are from the north who are my tribe don't like to hear that, but I'm all about unity. I'm all about one nation, one people, going back to the great days of contributing to Africa.
So there's kind of 2 phases of what you're hoping for there, right? There's the first phase, which is unity in Somalia, and then unity and border-free existence in Africa. What do you see as the potential mechanism of how that would actually happen?
That would happen the first stage. Somalia, I think what we need to do is, just like in Rwanda, we need to create a reconciliation process. I know in every nation, whether it's a European nation, whether it's a Eastern nation, whether it's an African nation, every nation has its own history of infighting. There are folks who have been killed, and that is something that I accept. There's always atrocity that has happened in the past. So how do we move forward? How can we heal? And the first step for Somalia is to create that process, just like in Rwanda, just like the genocide that happened in Rwanda. Within 1 month, you lose a number that is crazy. What is it? About 900,000 people that were lost in 1 month. That is almost 30,000 people a day killing each other. And so imagine if Rwanda can really come up from those ashes and reconcile and create a healing process as a nation and admit to the wrongdoings of the nation and to move forward. That is the similar model Somalia needs right now. And I think it's doable. I think we did not get to the level of Rwanda in terms of the genocide, in terms of the killing. But I know we have to admit to the past aggression and also create a system that creates trust. Because at the end of the day, you also have to work towards trust building, because you have all these different tribes that feel some type of way from other tribes. Some people feel like, they're the minority. So how can we create a system that's inclusive that, that is based on merit, not based on the tribal affiliation, but on merit, and also learn from the models that are working. South Africa had Mandela created the same process for South Africa. He could have turned the cheek and said, you know what, let's take the nation over and, kick white folks out, back to Australia, back to UK, whatever. He didn't do that. He said, you know what, we are brothers. We've been living here together for so long. We can't push one another away in terms of reconciliation process. So he brought his people together. That worked for South Africa. It might not be where it should be, but it worked for them. Then Rwanda did the same thing. So Africa needs to learn from its own brothers and sisters who have already created similar process. And Somalia is definitely, a step away from that. But it's unfortunate that we're still practicing the divide and conquer tactics even within ourselves, in terms of choosing a president, in terms of creating a political system. I disagree with the 4.5. I disagree with many of the things that are going on in Somalia right now, but I think that's the step one. Step two with Africa, it needs, just like the Euro League, or not the Euro League, I'm thinking of soccer, but just if you look at in Europe, how they came together, created one currency, created, laws that benefited their borders. Africa can also do similar things, can also get rid of, the idea. There are some nations that are still under colonial influence, that are still struggling to dismantle the system that kept them from, thriving. So we can get rid of the Berlin Conference borders in terms of making sure that Africans can freely move around within Africa. It is crazy that everyone else in the world from Europe and America can go to Africa without asking for a visa or without going through a process that is impossible. But when it comes to an African, they cannot do business with each other. They cannot move freely amongst each other, which is ridiculous. And so I think we can fix that through the model of Rwanda, go through the African Union, just like the European Union is doing its own thing. So you got to really think Africa first, and then think about the interests of Africa and the future of Africa in order to have a Africa that is thriving in the future. We want the same thing that you would want in America, that I would want in America, the same thing Europe would want for its babies. We would want the same thing for our babies and their babies. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, as a human being, we need the basic needs. And the basic need right now is making sure having a thriving continent, just like everyone else.
Right. And it seems like what you're saying is the big barrier to that is people aren't going through reconciliation process, but instead would be, say, in part of a kind of vengeance-based system.
True.
So
it's definitely, that is some of the issues as well. Yeah.
So, and that's just sort of a guess, but I'm curious then, what do you think the biggest barriers towards reconciliation are right now in Somalia specifically?
The system we have in place, clan-based election, or a process that put in place that really doesn't address a thriving system. Right now, I would say we need to really bring together all the regions, the leadership, and talk about unity and what it means to have one nation under one president. That's what we need to have. But in order for that to happen, we got to dismantle a system that's not benefiting us, a system that has not worked for us. We have already seen what it means to have a democracy, a republic, something that works. We've already had that in the past. It's not like we're a nation that really haven't tasted what that functioning system is. We've already got a taste of that. Let's just go back to that and create, merit-based rules in terms of ruling the nation. When the South and the North came together, They wanted one nation. Why don't we just go back to that initiative, that first initiative of saying, let's unite the nation as one. Then let's tackle the healing process. Let's create, let's acknowledge that wrongs were done by people in the past, but we shouldn't punish people that are living today for the folks that have committed crimes for the past.
Right. So you've got people taking things that happened to their ancestors very personally and using that as a basis for division between people who are currently living, who may not have done anything to each other, but because somebody in the past hurt somebody else in the past who's closely related, you're having the issue that there's consistent conflict that doesn't die down.
Yeah. Look at it. I'll give you a good example. Look at America right now. There's a lot of calls for change in the system. And the system we're talking about is an outdated system that, we see there's no equity in terms of all the disparities that are going on. We are asking for police accountability. We're asking for a system that has racial equity in terms of how things are distributed within the U.S. People are still struggling towards dismantling an old system that is not benefiting or that's not distributing all the resources equally, right? And so in Somalia, it's similar to that. We are trying to dismantle a system that does not benefit the nation as a whole. We do understand mistakes were made in the past. Folks who made those mistakes are dead today. We understand only few are benefiting from the chaos. But how can we create a system in place so that those few do not continue to benefit from that chaos? Now, if I decide to open my own little space in terms of a nation building and say me and my homies are going to build some, a system that is only going to benefit my tribe, what does that do to anyone that's outside the fold of my tribe? It brings harm to them. It's like saying, we're building a nation, like we complain about white supremacy, the Aryan brothers, and then, we say those are things that are harming the nation as a whole. And in Somalia, the 4.5 system, the clan-based system is harming us. We're admitting to that your tribe and you are worth less than, you are not worthy of the bigger tribes. So that type of thinking is what we need to dismantle, and that type of system. And if you look at our leaders, they were all educated in the West. The Somaliland president, educated in the West. The Jubaland president, educated in the West. The president of Somalia, educated in the West, in the US. These are guys who were educated in the West, whether in Russia, in the Soviet Union era, or in America, or in the UK. And so those guys who are already educated shouldn't be supporting a system that is putting us back hundreds of years. All it breeds is hate, division, disunity. And as a youngster, as a person as a father of 4, I don't want my kids to live through that same system. I want my kids to live in a system where they can say, we see that Somalia is thriving. We see Somalia is a merit-based ruling nation.
How old are your kids?
Oldest one is 15, man. I had kids when I was young, man. I'm still young, My kids are 15, and then you got a 12-year-old, and you got a 9-year-old, and then a 6-year-old, 7-year-old.
We're in some of the same boat. So I have 21.
Wow, you're pretty young, bro.
Yeah. Well, the 21-year-old was adopted, but I did have kids young.
Okay.
My firstborn is about to turn 7 next month. I have 6-year-old daughter, 5-year-old daughter, 2-year-old son, and then another girl on the way due this year.
Man, congrats. That's pretty cool.
So
definitely, So.
Sorry, go ahead.
Kids are a blessing. I said, yeah, definitely. That's a pretty cool thing.
So I'm curious, for kind of now being outside of Somalia, does that tribal system impact people who have moved here, or does everyone just sort of stick together because they're Somali?
You know, to be honest with you, not our generation, right? Because my wife is from the South. I'm from the North. You know, there's a lot of Somalis who are like-minded that see that the practice of some of the practices that are going on in Somalia now or in the past has nothing to do with us, and we want to see a change. But also, there are some pockets who still affiliate with tribal situation, and those are people that are not willing to grow in terms of human development, human growth. And you will always have tribal issues. You will always have tribal issue in the West because there are some folks who have allegiance to their regions. Because at the end of the day, I told you I'm from the North. I have a home in the North. My wife is from the South. I'm gonna have a home in the South. I wanna live freely in Somalia without feeling that I have to be from a certain area or a certain tribe. But there are some folks who are still caught up. I know great people, great friends of mine. If you talk about their region, they get butthurt. You know, they feel some type of way. You know, it's like, come on, man. You're from the West, educated in the West. You promote democracy. You participated in a democratic election here. You have the right to vote for whoever you want based on merit and policy. Why don't you bring that same thinking to Africa? Bring that same thinking to Africa and stop being, you know, having dual personalities in terms of when it comes to Somalia, you want to have a certain way. And when it comes to the States and Canada or the West, you want to be this, you know, I'm all about merit-based. I'm all about policies. And I don't care about, you know, who's who, as long as they, you know, uphold my values. And that should be the same mindset when it comes to Somalia. But there is some issues. And, you know, like I said, those who continue to play that narrative of the tribalism, clan-based politics, my region, that region, are just people who haven't really grown yet mentally in terms of thinking about the future and their grandchildren.
So I'm curious. So it sounds like what you're saying here is that there's people who are sort of stuck in an old system of doing things,
Mm-hmm.
and but then you have a lot of people who are growing past that, both here in the West and some back in Somalia. What is it you want people to be looking at? What is it you want people to be thinking, okay, let's look at this thing and let's be this? Is it the Somalia of the early 60s, or is it something beyond that?
For me, I think we don't need to reinvent the wheel. So we know what we can achieve as a nation when we are united. And I want people to think, you know, be forward thinkers. Think about Somalia that can have the model of Rwanda. I mean, I don't know if you've been to Rwanda. I've been to Rwanda 2018. Man, I was in love with Rwanda. How progressive they are in terms of development, you know, and also the leadership piece, having women, you know, I think they said their parliament is like 60% of women, having initiatives that are youth-led, having infrastructure that looks futuristic in terms of how environmental friendly it is. So that is the Somalia that I want people to look forward to. A model that is doable, a model that an African nation that went through, you know, civil war, that went through genocide has accomplished. And so when I talk to folks, whether Somalis or non-Somalis, I want them to understand you have a nation that is full of rich minerals, a nation that has the longest coast in Africa, a nation that haven't really tapped out on their achievements, right? Because if you look at Somalis everywhere in the world, we're very creative people. We get involved in politics. We are business people. We're always contributing. You look at the International Court, The Hague, the president is Somali. You look at the Trudeau, one of its ministers is Somali. You look at in the US, from local to the national, Somalis are participating in a system that is democratic. So we can definitely duplicate something similar to that in Somalia. We have the people, we have the talent, we have individuals that can move the nation forward, but we got to get rid of a system that's holding us back. Every 3 steps we take forward, we got to take 4 steps back. So, and that's what's really hurting us. And we got to think about our future generation. So Somalia has no issues in ruling itself, has no issue of food shortage, has no issue of when it comes to money. We send a lot of money back home. Somalia is built by the people. It was built by its own citizen from the diaspora. That money that went to Somalia has built, I don't know if you've ever been to Somalia, but you can see the progress. If you look at certain videos, like, how quickly we are improving. When I went back to the north, we had China now is heading to Africa. You see a lot of folks from China. You see folks from Europe living in Somalia. When I say folks from Europe, I'm not talking about Somalis. I'm talking about folks who are Swedish, who are from the Netherlands. You see folks from other countries living in Somalia. So the opportunities are there in Somalia to grow. I've seen folks from Syria, who migrated to Somalia. I've seen folks from Yemen. I've seen folks from Pakistan and India working in Somalia. So that, Somalia has, this wealth that hasn't been tapped to. And I think Somalia can definitely get to where it should be in the future if folks give it the chance to let it grow. And I know there's a lot of external stakeholders who are meddling with our internal affairs. That is definitely because we see it from the money that they're bringing into certain regions, and also creating division amongst from within families. The same brothers and sisters who are dividing the nations into like small islands, in terms of ruling. So I think Somalia will overcome this one day, and it will be a nation where you'll see a lot of visitors just to come see the beauty of it as well.
So if you're in a place where the system needs to change, and there's a lot of people around the world who feel the same way as you, what is going to be the resistance to that from who are going to be the people who are trying to stop that, both externally and internally? Who inside the country does not want this kind of progressive renewal, and who from outside the country doesn't want to see that?
To be realistic, anyone that still upholds those tribalistic mindset, who still wants to see that their tribe should be ruling, or my tribe is better than this. And sometimes they might not say it, but you can definitely see from their behaviors how they behave in terms of when we talk about national unity and things like that. And also corrupt politicians, and also the old guards, cats who've been in the military in the 60s, 70s, who are not willing to retire, who are not willing to give up, their luxury life. And so those are the internal folks that are still creating chaos within the country. And so I created gang mindset, creating, divisions of, we're from this tribe, we're from that tribe, we're from this region. Those are the obstacles internally. And also the corrupt individuals who all are about making money and stacking up so that they can build their, their mansions in the state or in out of nations. Another one, I would say, it's easy to exploit Somalia's water. It's easy to exploit Somalia in terms of mineral. But if you look at the external holders, they rather have that status quo where people can come in and just do as they wish. How many times did we hear about, pirates hijacking ships, right? Sometimes you wonder how many people, how many nations are in this water? You have China, you have Japan, you hear everyone, Iran. The other day I was reading an article about Iran being fishing in Somali waters. If that happened in the States or around UK or around any European nation or Arab nation, they would be quick to react and stop any intruder. But when it comes to a nation that has no power, everyone will continue to exploit them. You know, we complain about the Berlin conference, right? A similar thing is going on right now. The Chinese are coming to Africa, buying off corrupt dictators and giving their family money so that they can own the assets of the nation. You know, you hear nations who cannot pay their debt, so therefore the Chinese are coming in and doing as they wish. So people are being bought off, you know, and it's easy to buy off a corrupt dictator. It's easy to buy off a guy who's never had people first mentality.
Right.
And so, and another thing is the Middle East. It's another issue. Arab nations creating wars left and right. You know, the same poor nations before oil that were starving, that were, you know, receiving aid from Somalia, receiving, you know, help from Somalia, are the ones making sure today that we don't succeed. So what do? They create, okay, I'm going to build a hospital for you, but you have to fight the wars in Yemen. Look at the bribery. You know, it's just like something, why would I want to kill another poor person over your own interests? Then you have another nation that says, you know, I'm going to give you this much amount of money if you allow me to use your airspace. And then the other nation says, you know what, we'll cut diplomatic ties if you allow this nation to use this. So we're being used left and right. We're being pulled everywhere because they know we are very vulnerable right now. No one ever dared to do that, James. I'm being honest. When it was a dictator, when Siad Barre was ruling, no Arab nation, no other nation ever disrespected us the way we are getting disrespected today. And is that because of the weak leadership?
So weak, corrupt leadership in this tribally divided society allows people who want to exploit the nation to exploit it in a way that it would be unexploitable if there was unity and leadership that served the people.
True, I agree. Even if we had a leadership style of Rwanda, I know many folks complain about Kagame's style of ruling for so many years, right? And they said he's been around for too long. But if the nation chose that style of leadership and it's working for them, I'm not in a place to tell them how and who should rule them. I'm not a Rwandese citizen to tell them who should lead them into a prosperity, you know, future. So at the end of the day, sometimes I say to myself, democracy is not even working for Somalia. Maybe they need an iron fist. Maybe they need someone to hold them, you know, tell them, you're not going to create this chaos. We will no longer accept that. Sometimes I wonder, what do we need for us to get to where most nations have gotten to today? America didn't get to where it is unless blood was shed. Let's be real, you know, let's be honest. America fought really hard and millions have died to make sure that it's not divided into pockets of nations that are supporting the interests of other nations. And I think sometimes you say to yourself, you know, this democracy stuff is not working if it continues this way. Maybe these people need a wake-up call. Maybe we need a leader like Kagame. We need someone that says, you know what, you're not going to continue to bring the nation into, you know, further chaos. So sometimes you lose hope in terms of, you know, man, will things ever change? Is that question, you know, continues to come to your mind, you know? So hopefully I have a lot of hope that things will change and Somalia will hopefully unite one day.
So on a smaller scale, how do you think that if there's like a young Somali man or woman, or specifically a guy who's, say, just become the leader of a business or has just become a parent, what do you think are the leadership qualities that he should focus on growing in himself if he wants to be the kind of leader the Somali community needs as a whole?
In terms of leadership quality, I would think someone who's who's thinking outside the box, someone who's very creative in terms of how do you bring this, the many divisions? How do you bring folks from many walks of life, different tribes, different practices and experiences, in terms of culturally? How do you bring all these people together? Someone who can think outside the box, who can unite the people, who can, charismatic, you know what I'm saying? Who can bring, sometimes it takes a couple speeches. It takes someone who can articulate policies in a way wins hearts and minds. You and I from live in the West, if we were to go to a lecture and we were holding a position, we thought, this is my position, and I don't think I can get convinced otherwise that this is not a good position, right, to take. And we go to that lecture, or we get opportunity to listen to folks who can, make you think outside the box and say, okay, maybe I was holding into, a principle, set of ideas that really never been challenged before. And so if you are a leader that have that quality, that characteristics, that you can convince the people, that you can come out and be part of the people, and that you have humility, right? And you're not hiding behind your mansion or the soldiers, or you're not just putting on uniform. Every time you see an African president, whether democratic or not, you see him always putting on a uniform. For who? You've never been in the military. What message are you sending to the people? So that's one thing I ask myself. What message are you sending to the people? And when I see you in a uniform, basically you're showing me that dictatorship style of ruling, of management and leadership. And so you got to be really smart in terms of who you're dealing with, and also why are you there to begin with. And so the leadership quality has to be something that you have to be willing to accept criticism, be receptive to feedback. I was attending at a conference in Rwanda 2018, and it was a youth-led initiative. It was called Youth Connect. And when we got there, there was a young man from Nigeria who was criticizing African leaderships. And he was telling the minister of Rwanda that why are we having leaders who are, from the cradle to the grave type of style of leadership? Why can we have leaders give up, create the revolving chair? And so he was criticizing an African leader in front of 20,000 people. And that leader was very receptive to that feedback. In most countries, you can't do that. Even the ones who were educated in the West were not even allowed criticism. Why are you afraid of criticism? So if you are a leader who cannot allow criticism, who cannot allow difference of opinion, then that position is not for you. But the youngsters, the young fathers, the young sisters who are from the diaspora have opportunity to be those leaders for Somalia, to accept, the criticism that is needed, to accept, a role that, the chair needs to be a revolving chair, not a chair that is a lifetime position. And many of the ones who are educated are the worst sometimes than the people that are really in the country sometimes. You see guys who are educated who have a lifetime position because they just want to eat for the rest of their life until they die. And that's what I'm against, and that's a mentality that I will fight against and I'll preach against until I see change come about.
So I think there's a lot of great stuff in what you've said there. So the qualities that you're ultimately looking for are humility, innovation, a willingness to serve the people, and somebody who's willing to take criticism, right? So that they're willing for the truth about what's going on to be bigger than their own personal little kingdom, and are willing to let something that's above them kind of win rather than letting their side win.
No, definitely, yeah. It's like a company. When you hire all these talents, that to your company, it enhances your brand. It brings, look at Apple's is a great example. When Steve Jobs was doing his thing, and some folks weren't happy about it, he had too much power right in the beginning, and there was a little bit of conflict, they let him go. And then when he came back and he took off again, because they knew what he was an asset to the company and to that brand. And sometimes in leadership, you need to understand that you surround yourself with folks that are going to move this brand to the next level. Just like a company, you should worry about your brand. And your brand as a leader is how much access you allow to the folks that are underneath you. And right now, Africa needs leadership that allows the people under the president or the prime minister to do some of the work that is necessary for the nation, and allow feedback, allow criticism, allow the differences in opinion. So until then, you will have same chaos. The enemy within cannot defeat you. The enemy outside cannot defeat you if you have unity from within. So Africa, the issue has nothing to do with the France, has nothing to do with the European Union, has nothing to do with, although they do play roles, but you can't do anything to me if we are strong from within. And Africa's issue is from within, and holding each other accountable and understanding your true goal for this nation and your true goal for Africa in terms of unity. And until that happens, you will continue to see chaos in every pocket of the continent. And, it's unfortunate, and that's the way it is. And now China is coming in with money, so they're purchasing everybody off. And that's another thing that we got to worry about on top of everything that we're dealing with.
Right. So if Africa doesn't deal with its internal issues, then there's another external power waiting in the wings just to kind of swoop in and exploit all over again.
Yes. Exploit, push their initiative, their agenda. Imagine this, James. Imagine Africa was a very powerful nation, consists of all these small countries, right? Because you still got to respect the language, the cultural practices that exist within the continent. And we were united under one currency. And we had our own agenda. And we've decided to come to America or to Europe or to Asia to push our agenda, our initiative. Those continents and nations would feel offended, insulted, disrespected, that we are coming to impose our way of life, our agenda from the motherland, the continent, towards European nations and Asian nations and Arab nations. And they will do whatever it takes to make sure that we don't bring our agenda to their nations. So when you look at what's going on today, everyone else is doing the same thing to us that they wouldn't want themselves to be done to them, basically.
Right.
And that is not fair to Africa. It's not fair to Somalia. Somalia right now has every nation inside our country to create a sphere of influence, to create an influence over that country. You have the British supporting the North. The Italians still have connection with the South. We know Djibouti is gone. When they were given opportunity to become an independent nation and to join Somalia, somehow they decided to stay colonized. They're like, we want to continue the colonization. And they became independent in 1975. And then you have the issue with Kenya. So for me, I care less about the Somalis in Kenya coming back to Somalia, or Djibouti coming back, or Ethiopia, Somalis give us our region back. That's not what I'm fighting for. What I'm fighting for is one Africa, countries without, restrictive movement, because right now we don't have any relationships. The only thing that happens in Africa is conflict. You see always fighting between brothers and sisters. For what reason? For nothing. So in order to overcome all these obstacles, we need a united Africa. We need Africa that has an agenda that's going to really help our future offsprings. The same thing I would want for my kids who are living in a good life right now, who are doing well, who are, thinking about their future. I want the same thing for my brothers and sisters in Somalia. I want for my brothers and sisters in the continent. I would want for every nation that, that is thriving. The same thing. But whenever I say, please stay out of our politics, our internal affair, then somehow I become, they say one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, right? So as long as Europe and all these guys are freedom fighting in terms of advocating for their rights, they make everyone else look like, oh, we got Al-Shabaab, we got this, we got that. All this is a creation of so that you can control chaos. That's what I call it. It's a control chaos in the world. When you have Al-Shabaab, a bunch of small pockets creating chaos. So I hope to see, Africa free from external affairs.
So that ties quite neatly into my next question here. So what you've been saying is that Somalia became weak from within, which allowed it to be exploited from without, right? So let's do the kind of reverse of that, right? So in an ideal world, obviously it's the Somali people's responsibility to fix what's going on in Somalia. But for people outside of Somalia who are not Somali, but care about the future of the country, how are ways that people who are not Somali or nations that are not Somalia can come alongside the country in the future in a way that's not pushy, in a way that's not colonial?
How can they contribute? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
I mean, when we, in the West, when we talk about bringing ideas, you got to allow things to come from bottom to top approach, right? So usually we have a lot of policies where always leadership tells you what to do. We want you to implement this. We know what's best for you. We think, just come with open-minded if you have an idea, because I wouldn't reject anyone that came to me with an open-minded idea that didn't have any pre-existing conditions, right? And I feel like the majority, sorry, I got a phone call. I feel like majority of the folks that come to Africa or even to Somalia have some pre-existing condition. And if folks are really willing about the growth of a nation and the development of a nation, let's create a partnership, or whatever idea or proposal that you have should be something that is mutual, that benefits us both. Until we have that type of mindset, I don't think outsiders can really contribute to a nation, because what you're doing is some people are coming in and saying, we know better. Since we know better, let me show you how we do things. I've attended the Somali diaspora meeting in Washington, D.C. The Minister of Financing came, a bunch of Somalis from the diaspora came, youngsters who really wanted to see, they wanted us to come back and contribute, right? Which is great. But I got to have the basic necessities. You got to have safety. You got to have a working system in order for me to come. If the president is hiding and the prime minister's life is at risk, what do you think someone at the diaspora working at Microsoft and Expedia and doing, entrepreneurship is going to risk his life and go and just walk away from all this? Impossible. They won't do that. So what we asked them, we said, if there's no safety, then there's no prosperity. Safety is the number one priority. And so we had folks who were from the World Bank there. We had folks who were from different sector of world politics. But one thing that I've noticed is everyone preached as the knower of all. We know better. We can show you how to build, right? But the goal is, okay, if you are the driver and I'm in the passenger seat, that means I have no control of my destiny in terms of the things that I can do within the country. And it's like when you get in debt, when China gives you a loan, that loan comes with, pre-existing conditions. And if you cannot fulfill that, then that means you have to give up something. And so that's the kind of the things that we want to avoid in terms of people who really want to bring ideas to the table, proposal to the table. We want to make sure that we understand there's a mutual benefit between nations. Your benefit is my benefit. And that's what we're hoping for in terms of when it comes to allowing folks to come in and to contribute. Just the same way, if you were to call on me in Africa and say, Ayanle or Somalia, we need your assistance. Example is COVID-19. Nations that we look down on, like Venezuela, Cuba, right? That we've created this image of these nations are villains. When COVID-19 happened, who was the first nation that ran to Italy to help them out? Right? The first nation to help out Italy were Venezuela and Cuba to stabilize the situation because they have so many doctors, you know, the experience that they have. And when it comes to other nations, we see nations running to the aid of other nations. So let's think about when it comes to collective contribution, let's think about 50-50. Let's think about what it means to be partner in whatever that proposal is. And that's why I welcome any contribution as long as it's not something that's pre-cooked. That's what I call it. Don't bring me to a table that you already cooked the meal and ready and you just want me to eat with you. Let's start the cooking from scratch.
Right. So so people coming in to view the country as a potential to exploit it, and almost people coming in to see it as charity are the two sides of the same coin, because it's both a posture of, okay, we kind of know what works best.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not treating someone as an equal, right? And an equal can critique, an equal has ideas, but an equal doesn't assume they're the leader of a situation that the other person knows more about.
True, I agree.
So are you optimistic about the future of Somalia right now, or does it feel kind of dark for you?
To be honest with you, you got to be optimistic, because you got to look at life this way. A civil war broke out as a child, not knowing what the future holds. You flee to a neighboring country. You end up in refugee camps, and you end up in America, and you get the opportunity to do many great things. And so when I look at life, it's like the bird. Your wings have to be balanced, fear and hope. I fear that we might get into more chaos, but also I'm very optimistic in terms of what the end result will be. I believe there'll be a day where folks will get tired of this and say, you know what, we no longer care about the tribalistic, practices. And so I'm very hopeful. I got kids. You got to be hopeful when you have kids, man. Many people don't like kids. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people that say, man, I don't like kids. I'm saying, why? They said it's easier to raise a dog and to put them down whenever. I said, man, that's pretty harsh. But at the end of the day, if you are having a kid and you're a parent, you're always hopeful and optimistic of what they can become. And as a parent, I'm very hopeful for Somalia that one day they will overcome what they're going through. And today, I think Somalia is better off than 5 years ago, better off than 10 years ago. I can go travel into many cities in Somalia. I can go to Mogadishu, and not really feel that, my life is in danger. Yeah, there might be, bombings here and there. You have those things, but it's like Chicago. If I go to Compton, if I go to Chicago, to certain neighborhoods, things can go wrong quickly, and so neighborhood has no crime. I mean, there's nations where you're going to have some issues, but I think we can overcome that. There's definitely a lot of us in the diaspora are very optimistic in terms of Somalia overcoming its issues.
So for you, do you believe that do you believe in, curious if you believe that Somalia and the world has a destiny, if there's a sort of a script we're all living by, or do you think it's in the hands of the people who live there?
I think it's always the hands of the people. If you look at the Boston Tea Party, it was the hands of the people, right? They wanted liberation. When you look at the Civil War, it was the hands of the people to create change. Some nations go through wars to get to where they need to get to. At times, I'm a believer of people can bring change from within. And if the world can preach, this is where Somalia should be, this is how it should, if the people are not accepting that, nothing will change.
Right.
You know, so the change comes from within. And I believe as long as we are going towards that route, that path of, you know what, we had enough. We had enough of division. Your success is my success. Your failure is my failure. When we have that type of attitude and we create constitution based on, you know, not we when I say as a nation, not we as my tribe and this and that, then you will see a nation that's moving forward. But to be honest with you, you have the whole world in our waters. Still can't figure out how to control the situation because everyone is not coming with a pure intention. Everyone is coming in with an agenda. Whether the agenda is up front or hidden, God knows best. But at the end of the day, all I know is similar ideas will not be allowed in waters. Other sovereign nations will not allow other folks to invade their waters. But people will always take advantage of the vulnerable and of the weak. But one day, just like how we received our independence and empires got tired of ruling others, you know, people will get their sovereignty back and we'll get back to regular life. But, you know, you just got to get, you know, I'm a man of faith, so, you know, I leave it up to God. You know, destiny is written for all of us. We remember the Mongolian nations when they used to rule the world. We remember, you know, Rome when it used to rule the world. We remember when Ottomans were ruling the world. You know, you remember so many empires that, you know, that disappeared. And then also you had other empires that emerged. And, you know, it's up to God who's gonna emerge from all the chaosness in the future.
Well, I agree. I'm hopeful as well, because one thing that you see in the Bible specifically is there's a promise that the kingdom of God, what it does is it grows gradually and gradually breaks apart all the empires on earth, but blesses all the nations. So fundamentally, empires, Europeans ruling Africa, Arabs ruling Africa, Mongolians ruling Africa, you know, anybody ruling anybody else is not a good thing, right? It's not the way God has intended the world to exist. So God's design is for nations to be blessed, to be prosperous, to be full of servant leaders and just laws. And as a Christian, I fundamentally believe that's coming for everywhere, including Somalia. So my faith gives me an optimistic outlook that any nation can be transformed, and all those things that you're talking about, right? The servant leadership, the desire for reconciliation, that truth is more important than whichever tribe is leading. I believe Jesus embodies all those things, and that's what his kingdom on earth is ultimately about. And I fully believe Somalia gets to experience that too at some point. So I'm excited.
I'm gonna be honest with you. You know, for us Muslims, because Somalia is a nation that is fully Muslim nation, and Jesus, peace be upon him, we believe he was a prophet of God, right? And you guys believe he's the Father, the Trinity part of it. But for me as a Muslim, I do believe, you know, Somalia and Islam to be the nation's calling. And just like I can see, James, when I read Al-Ma'idah, I can tell you guys are doing the calling people to God's work, right? You're calling people to God, to Christianity. I can kind of tell a little bit because I can kind of see you got the Arabic background on Ma'idah, and then and the Surah Ma'idah. And I know a lot of things. I'd read a little bit about you guys, and I understand the mission and the calling that you guys have. And as a Muslim, just like the same way you're calling people to Jesus, and we're saying Isa alayhi salam, we're calling you to Islam as well. You know, because everyone is doing God's work. And I believe, you know, as you can see, Islam spreading even to Europe. And I think you noticed, while you guys are coming east and in Africa and preaching Christianity, we're also, you know, calling people to Islam, the oneness of God. And calling, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you know, he said when it comes to religion, Islam is the last, you know, the last complete religion in the eyes of Allah. And so I would, the same way you're calling, doing God's work, I'm calling you, James, and saying accept Islam and the oneness of God, you know. So and like I said, we do it in a respectful manner, and we do it in a way, we say, with hikmah, with wisdom. And like I said, it's good to exchange and have conversation without getting angry, without getting offended. And some people get offended easily.
Right.
They get offended easily, and you know, little things get under their skin. And but then that creates even other divisions. We're not allowed opportunity for us to have conversation. And then I know many of our preachers, I'm not a preacher, but I know enough as a Muslim to call people to Islam. The way I behave, the way you know, I do things, I do it through, because of the teaching of the Prophet ﷺ. It is Sunnah, and you know many of that stuff. I know definitely you have a lot of knowledge about Islam, but you know, we're calling people to da'wah as well, brother. Just the same way you're calling da'wah, Christianity da'wah, we're calling people to Islam as well.
Right, and for us as an organization, that we're under no illusions that we have the power to change each other's minds, right?
Yes.
And Christians and Muslims both have a call to spread what we believe to be truth. But we also both have a belief in the sovereignty of God, right? That God is the one over hearts and minds, right? So if we both believe that, then we are free to have an open conversation where we say what we really think and not get offended by each other, right? Because that's in God's hands. And I think that I don't just want, the goal of Al-Maida is that I want people to be able to experience the Jesus of the Bible themselves, right? I want them to be able to at least make an informed decision, right? Because I think you'd agree with me that a lot of people just have a misconception about Islam and would reject it wholesale because of that. And while not everybody, you wouldn't believe everybody who understands it perfectly would necessarily become a Muslim, you would at least believe that you'd want them to have all the information. And we'd want the same thing, right? We want people to be able to make informed decisions, to have a reasoned approach. And even if we continue disagreeing, we should at least understand each other. And
no, definitely. And I appreciate that. And I respect that. To be honest with you, James, I respect that more than the people that are trying to kumbaya and try to say, you know what, we are all one in humanity, and trying to sidestep of what each individual is trying to bring to the table. Just in Christianity and in Islam, I know there are folks who are preachers, but sidestep very tough conversations, and you know, try to create some illusion or just give you an answer that is sweet to your ears, right? And I respect that, the position that you hold, and I do believe in, you know, it's up to God who changes the hearts and the minds. And as a Muslim, you know, I don't believe in, knocking on doors and driving people crazy so they can accept Islam. I don't believe in that. I think guidance is from God. But what my goal is as a Muslim to let you know the beauty of Islam. And if you have questions about Islam, I'll tell you according to my knowledge. And if I don't know, I say God knows best. And the preachers probably would have more in terms of giving you the right answer. But when it comes to Christianity and Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism, let's all mix things. I like to say in that room and in that space, in Surah you read, we all in Surah Kafirun, that surah, Qul ya al-Kafirun, the disbeliever, and Allah talks about it and says, "Oh, you who disbelieved," right? And talks about, you keep your religion, I keep mine. So there's no saying, hey James, if you don't leave what you're doing, I'm gonna be unhappy with you. No, that's not the case. I respect you as an individual. You bring to the table certain values, your core beliefs, and you articulate that to the people. And the same way for me in Islam, I'm gonna hold my position and call people to the oneness of God, and tell people, we in the Torah, in the Injil, that in Islam we believe in all the prophets. We believe in heaven and hell. We believe in there's a purpose of life, right? And we're not just like the animals who just living life, and we believe in that. And there's so many things that you and I can agree on in terms of our principles and our values. When it comes to family value, there's a lot of things, and of course there's a lot of disagreements as well. But at the end of the day, we're gonna walk away having more respect for one another. But at the end of the day, but there's certain Muslims that you will see, they will confuse cultural practices with Islam. Islam is superior to the human beings, meaning that humans make mistakes. They have shortcomings. My actions does not take anything away from Islam. That is my cultural beliefs. If you see me doing something, it has nothing to do with Islam. Muslims and Islam are two different things. And people
Right.
confuse that most of the time. You know that. If you are someone that studied the Quran or Islam, there's a huge difference between a Muslim and what Islam is,
Right,
in terms
right.
of the theory.
Vast.
Yeah.
So I do have a question for you on that, and it's a sincere question. It's not a trap. I'm really
No.
curious what you'd have to say on this. That you're talking about the needing to avenge the sort of tribal society and the revenge culture, and revenge is a very old tradition in some streams of Islam, right? So it's even written into the Charter of Medina. And I'm curious, for you as a Muslim, because as a Christian, right? I believe in turning the other cheek, as you were quoting from South Africa. I believe in atonement, that Jesus' death reconciles people and pays the price. But for you as a Muslim, what do you believe is the antidote to revenge culture? How do you deal with that from your worldview?
To be honest with you, in Islam, we talk about forgiveness as well. And I know you talk about turning the other cheeks, but it hasn't been that way in the history of all mankind, So although the practice, the theory, it's great. It says turn the other cheek, but humanity has not really turned the other cheek in terms of when it comes to revenge and violence, and whether in the name of Christianity or even the time of wars in Islam, during Muslims when they were fighting. So, but definitely right now in Islam, there is the thing, repenting, making tawbah from the sins that you commit. We believe in, for us, we believe in our sins, that you still have to repent to God and ask for forgiveness. In terms of revenge, to be honest with you, these are cultural practices. These are cultural practices. I'll give you an example. The story of the Prophet ﷺ, when he was walking through a city and the young kids were throwing rocks at him. These are the Arabs at that time. And they were saying names to him. And they were hurting the Prophet ﷺ. And God sent the angel and said, would you like me to destroy this nation? He said, no, the Prophet ﷺ. He said, he said, no, the Prophet ﷺ said, no, because from their backs they will come, meaning offsprings that will accept Islam. So we believe that forgiveness is the best policy. And that, definitely some people will call for revenge in the name of God. Some people will say that. But at the end of the day, you can't blame the acts of few people for entire religion or entire, the 1.4 billion people in the world. If James does certain things or certain action, I'm not going to think every Christian in the world is like James or is behaving like James and this and that. And so it's not very fair when it comes to the narrative of Islam. You have people that are are creating this story, and then this thing that, you know, in Islam is all about revenge. It's all about, you know, making sure, you know, about killing, about, you know, all these things. Even suicide bombing, man, this is new to us. You know, all these car bombings you hear, all this. This is a man-made ideology and ideas in the less than the last century, I think.
Right. And that's actually something I bring up a lot of the time when I'm trying to talk to Christians about Islam, right?
Yeah.
Is that you have to understand how complex the Islamic source materials are. So I asked them that question: do you think the Quran or Hadith says it's okay to be a suicide bomber? And they said, I don't know. I said, well, of course it doesn't say that. There were no explosives when the Quran and the Hadith were written, right?
Yeah.
So you have to superimpose that onto the system. It can't possibly kind of directly grow out of the system. You have to work with it.
That's true. No, definitely. And like I said, at the end of the day, it's having dialogue. You got a message that you want to get out to the masses. We got a message we want to give people. You know, Islam, the beauty of Islam, we want to share that with our neighbors, with our, we can disagree in things as long as we're not insulting each other, we're not disrespecting one another. And I'm not really imposing myself on you and my way of life, you know, at the end of the day. But I will always call people to Islam, and I would always call people to the oneness of God. But there's a lot of spaces that they don't do that anymore. Nobody talks about, you know, the differences anymore. I know you used to watch Ahmed Deedat, God have mercy on his soul. He was a big time debater, and, you know, him and Swagger and all those guys, and you remember those debates. Man, I said, I wish I lived at that time, you know, meaning, you know, I wish I had the opportunity to be in their presence and to listen to the arguments that everyone brought forth. But you don't see that today anymore. What you see today is, if you preserve your values and you talk about it, then you get attacked from all over. I mean, it doesn't matter. It could be a Muslim. I'm talking to you right now the way I feel, my opinion, right? And how I feel as a Muslim. I bet you if other Muslims are watching this, some of them might get offended. And they're going to say, you're not a spokesman for me. But then how come I'm not offended when you're talking on our behalf as well? And you're being so apologetic. And so you try to water down everything. And you try to appease everyone else. And so that you can lower your values and not preserve your religious beliefs, right? And so I feel like everyone is entitled to their opinion. But at the end of the day, I'm going to listen to you. I'll take whatever I can take. You take whatever I can give. You know, it's vice versa. But at the end of the day, I'm not here to lose a lot of negative energy on people.
Right.
You know?
And that's the exact kind of space that we're trying to create, right? That, you know, you've read our website. We do not even try to hide that we're Christians, that we believe the Bible. But I take pride in never editing anybody, never silencing anybody. You can come on here, anyone can come on here and talk about what they believe in, and their words will stand, my words will stand. People can examine them and see what they think, and ultimately we'll trust the truth to win, right? You don't have to win. I don't have to win. Muslims don't have to win. Christians don't have to win, right? Meaning our tribes, right? We believe that God's truth will ultimately win in the end. And our job is just to show up and speak.
Present that message. That's our job. You know, what you're doing is, I read there's an organization called Uplift Dawah. I don't know if you heard of it.
Yeah.
They do Islamic, they have their own podcast now. And the brother does a lot of good work. I know he's a good brother of mine. We grew up together back in the Kent days. And so he's calling people to Islam. And like I said, you know, you gotta be willing to debate others, listen to their point of view, and then, you know, pick to differ. But at the same time, you know, I want to put some people in check too, because I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna sit around and just nod my head and agree with everything. If I find, you know, something to be offline, with respect, I'm gonna, you know, answer you and say, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but it's not the way it is you think it is, you know. And there's a lot of apologetic Muslims out there, and they won't give it to you like it is. And I'm not a preacher, but also I don't hold back. You know, I keep my value dear to me, And I don't think I'm doing injustice to myself if I lie and come as apologetic or appease a group of people because it's the trend, it's what everybody wants to hear, and people will always attack you for being a bigot or saying, oh, you're not inclusive or you're not this and that. Let it be it, because I'm not here to build a brand. You know what I'm saying? I'm not building a brand. If you believe in God and his message, and you believe that it's our goal to, spread that message through character, through action, through, whatever that may be, like the podcast and trying to bring people to have dialogue, so be it. But I'm not going to stop because, I might damage my brand, or how do I look? How do I come across? Is that person happy? Someone that I don't know, a stranger, I'm worried if I'm making them happy, which is the weird part in today's society. Social media, people worry about likes, about share, and they worry about the person that you don't know who's watching. Is that person happy? Am I projecting myself in a way that bringing the unknown into your space? So as long as I preach that message and I tell you how I feel, that's what I walk away with. At the end of the day, I'm not expecting you to hit like, share, and subscribe. I'm not that kind of guy. But if you do, great. If you don't, it doesn't mean, I don't think of you less. You know what I'm saying? I still respect you as an individual, as a human being. We just differ in many different things.
Right. And so from a Christian perspective, for me, right, I believe that ultimately I answer to God himself for every word that I speak.
Okay.
So that doesn't just, it compels me to speak what I believe to be true. And I'm not allowed to go trying to base what I say on how other people are what people are going to think of me or how people are going to feel about me, because it's not ultimately about me. And if we're people who truly believe in something transcendent, then we can't do that, right?
No, we can.
Like, why would I ever get offended by what somebody who disagrees with me says?
Yeah.
I'd be embarrassed to be offended because I'm not trying to be about me. I'm trying to be a representative of something much bigger than me.
No, definitely. And that's what I said, I got mad respect for that. When an individual holds their position, even though society is trending anti me. If you say something that's different from me, well, we're going to cancel you. You're not part of society. I mean, it's like, because I wasn't even part of that to begin with, part of the social media branding. If you want to cancel, go ahead, cancel. I mean, what are you really canceling? That I have a different opinion than you? And so that's a respect I give individuals that I come across. You hold to your position, I respect that. But if you ask me a question, I'm going to give you the most honest, whether if it's easy to swallow or not. And so that's why I said, you never know who's going to agree with you. You can have both sides saying, well, I disagree with James and Ayanle, or you have Somalis who disagree with me or Muslims who disagree with me. At the end of the day, I don't get paid for you to agree, for us to, for you, you don't pay me, I don't pay you, you don't put food on my family's table. But at the end of the day, it's just, we got to be honest. And I think we are getting away from just having that honest conversation. Many interfaith people are not really, I'm all for justice. I'm all for advocating for folks to have their rights. I'm never in a position that I'm not in a position of power to take people's rights away. But at the same time, I'm not going to allow you to make me feel like a victim or I can't have a say. I'm not a victim, and I refuse the narrative of victimhood. I'm not going to be, I talk about colonization, but it doesn't really, I don't lose sleep over it. It doesn't stop me from thriving. It doesn't stop me from, there's no cap to my success. I own that destiny. And with the will of God, I'm very appreciative as a Muslim, what God has provided for me and the opportunities and the access that I have and the people that I've encountered. My high school coaches, mentors were Christians. You come across all different folks, different faith, different background, mad respect. But at the end of the day, as long as you don't impose your way of life on me, I'm not imposing my way of life on you. But I will definitely tell you the honest answer that I can, possible that I can give in terms of the conversation. But, I appreciate your honesty. I appreciate, and when I saw Maida and I was like, I know a little bit about, just reading the Al-Maida initiative, I already knew, but based on assumption, I didn't say I don't want to do the conversation, right? Some people get like, if your feelings are hurt and if you're a very sensitive person, sometimes you don't take invitations, right? Because you're afraid of what that person might say to you or ask you that might offend you, that you might disagree or you might leave the conversation. So right away when you say, hey, what do you think of you coming on board? Sure. Because I know I can hold my, I can stand my ground, and then I can hold my position, and I know my worth and my value and my principles. So therefore, it will be I'll be an insecure person, if I were to hide from your conversation or not accept it, even though we have different styles of messages.
Yeah, right.
Of when it comes to gun.
And at this point, I've there's been no pretending about what I am or what I believe or what my hopes for people would be. But I've also had you're the 42nd guest I've had on the show at this point, and I'd say I'm friends with everybody who's come on the podcast to some degree, because the goal is not, because so often I think when people talk about religion, either it's let's all act like we believe the same thing so we can work towards some social cause together, or it's like CNN where everybody has 2 minutes and someone's just trying to win. Like when I'm talking to a Muslim, I want the conversations I want people to be able to hear everything you have to say in your words, and I want people to hear everything I have to say in my words. Then the viewer can go away and decide, what do you think?
That's the way it should be. That's how, conversation should be. Let the viewers decide for themselves. And that's how it used to be as well back in the days, even though things are trending different ways, And I do blame Muslim scholars who are very apologetic, appeasement, worried about their brands. And, and that's what society will do to you today. You can't have an honest conversation because you're afraid of what others will think of you. And that's the sad part of it. And, and it's both aisles. They're all worried about what comes out of their mouth. And, which is, I can understand. You have to be careful what you say. You don't harm others and hurt others. But at the same time, if my honesty is hurting you, that says a lot about you, And I'm sorry. What else should I say? Should I just stay silent? But yeah, it is what it is, my brother.
Well,
I appreciate it, like I said.
Well, I should let you go, but let's both keep working for a world where my children and your children can get food together and can also debate each other while remaining friends. And I hope to continue the conversation with you at some point. So
definitely.
Thank you for being here.
And where do I find your recording?
It'll be on our YouTube channel. It'll be on all your podcast catches. I'll send you the links tomorrow. And then
that's perfect. Yeah.
If there's anything you want me to link to, just send me that, and I can. If you want people to be able to find your work.
No, that's fine. You can, just send it to me. That's all. I'm cool. I'm very easy.
Great.
Easygoing guy. Nothing big deal. And you live in the north. I live in the south. Hopefully one day we'll have a bite to eat, man.
Yeah.
More.
Let's make it happen. Well, Ayanle, thank you for being here, and thank you guys for listening to the Al-Maida Initiative podcast. We will be back next week.